Hello, Stephen.
Well, hello.
Welcome to episode 2 of Feuertips.
Welcome.
And I see you have done the right thing. You are wearing green. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all of you celebrating. Look, I've prepared a little something. Isn't that great?
Very nice. Yes, I like to honor my Irish ancestry on this day, especially by wearing green.
Fantastic. But I am feeling like I should have worn green next St. Patrick's Day for sure. So, Stephen, why don't we remind everybody that's watching a little bit about how our show works? It's brand new and we're still figuring things out. But basically, in general, every week you will be presenting a new, different PL SQL tip, concept. At the end of the tip, we'll be inviting the live audience only, to participate in a quiz that we've prepared where you can we can see if you've been paying attention. And
That's right. Did you pay any attention? That's right.
there you go. And what we'll be doing actually is every week we'll be picking one winner from those of you that got it right. And we'll ask you to pick one of three out of three charities that we've identified, and we will be making a donation to that charity in your name. So, Stephen, last week actually we never introduced our charities to the audience. How about we do that quickly?
Definitely. So we were a little bit rough on that first round, skipped over a few things. So if you could go ahead and share your screen.
Perfect.
So as you may know, I've been working with Vincent Morneau, with Michelle and others at Insum, or formerly of Insum, to build out an app to help people have the most impact they can on climate action. It's called Every, EVRY. Go to every, evry.app, app, and you can install the app on your mobile device or your desktop and start using it. It's an Apex app. It's amazing. And what we're doing is then also building partnerships with organizations that are working to heal our planet. And of course, since Insum is so committed to helping us and helping the planet around climate change, we thought we'd also build in this aspect to Feuertips. So we picked three organizations that we'd like you to choose from if you're the winner, chosen as the winner. The first one is the Sheldrick Wildlife Foundation. So these folks operate rescues and rehabilitation for large mammals in Africa: elephants, rhinos, hippos. It's amazing. And I got to tell you, there aren't a lot of large mammals left in the world besides humans. We knock them out almost first of any in our areas, and have done that for literally hundreds of thousands of years. So we've really got to keep the ones we've got, and elephants in particular are just such amazing creatures. So Sheldrick Wildlife Foundation. Next, we have Center for Biological Diversity. So Center for Biological Diversity is incredibly important from a couple of standpoints. They have an action network to mobilize people around specific actions. They're focused on saving other species in the planet, and they do a lot of legal work. So we have to have a multi-pronged approach to beating climate change. And one of them will be getting the right laws passed and the wrong laws stopped. And the Center for Biological Diversity plays an enormous role there. So thank you so much for that, Center. And finally, we have Earthwatch. Earthwatch has been around for 50 years, focusing on the planet and specifically getting citizens and scientists to work together around the world to maximize our impact. They've done incredible work, lots of research, lots of great projects. We want to support them too. So we don't have a winner from last week. Apologies. So I'm the winner. I get to pick. And we're going to give our first $25 donation to Sheldrick Wildlife Foundation because they're really amazing. And you can adopt orphan elephants, by obviously giving some money. But anyway, check them out. Really fantastic. And by the way, we have a landing page for Feuertips. Is that right? Is that ready now, or will be announced soon?
Oh, it is. So if you go to insum.ca/Feuertips, I'll actually put that up on the screen in a bit. But that's where you can go to see all upcoming episodes and also catch any past episodes that you may have missed. Stephen's actually going to be really good and be publishing a blog to accompany most of the episodes. So that's where you can go to catch up with those as well. So I will put that up on the screen in a bit.
And also, I don't think it's there yet, but we'll add the three different organizations and links to them on that page too, so you can follow up and make your own massive donations.
No pressure though. But yeah, great idea. Okay, so speaking about the donations, we'll be using Kahoot again this week, and hopefully we've ironed out the kinks from last week. So what we'll ask you to do is, as Stephen's presenting the tip today, go to kahoot.it And that's the game pin over there. You can just put that in now, and it'll wait for you. It'll just wait there until we're ready to do the Kahoot. Let's just get you in there so that we can move into the quiz as quickly as possible at the end of the episode. And I'll be reminding you all of the pin throughout the show.
And maybe put the pin into the comments so people can see it there.
I will do that as well. Yes. Eric is wishing us a happy St. Patrick's Day. All right. So, Stephen, I decided that last week I didn't much love the whole producing, monitoring the comments, running the Kahoot, and then being present with you during the tips. So I thought it would be great if we would invite another INSOM consultant on to do the tip with you today. So I would like to introduce our very own Marlyn Zapata. Hello, Marlyn. Welcome to the show. Marlyn, you are actually just freshly arrived to Montreal from Peru. So you are experiencing your first Canadian winter. How's that been?
Yes. Well, it has been okay. I survived because the spring is coming. So yeah, I survived.
It's all better from here, I promise.
Finger crossed.
So guys, I'm going to go on backstage. I will be back for the Kahoot. Have a great show.
Thanks.
Catch you later. All right.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about good lazy and bad lazy. And for me, it's funny because I think lazy is a bad word. And also to a developer, you are a lazy developer, so that's bad. So I hope that I'm a good lazy. And well, Stephen, show us, what do you have for us?
Sure, let's dive right in. So first of all, I wonder if what Michelle just did, which is hand off a bunch of the work to you, is good lazy or bad lazy. Maybe we'll explore that at the end of the session. So yes, in general, I think that people associate lazy with negative. It's a bad thing. And yes, you can be very, very lazy in a bad way. And this is not just for programming, but every aspect of our lives. But I think it's also important to note that there are good ways that you can be lazy, especially in programming. And I thought I'd kind of explore that. So good lazy, bad lazy. What I'm going to do is start off by talking about an example of bad lazy. And then we'll take a look at an example of good lazy. Now, let's see. I just realized that I didn't quite prepare myself completely to show you the bad lazy. So let's pull that up.
We have a bad lazy, probably.
So let me just pull up this piece of code, and then I'll show you bad lazy. So let's put it into SQL Developer. Let's share my screen, and let's get going. So Michelle, can you share my screen? You did. Look at that. Amazing. Okay. So hopefully you can see this on the page. This is a procedure called show last name. And it is, I think, a great example of what I consider to be classic bad lazy. So I'm passing in the ID. I'm getting the employee for that ID. And this is the primary key lookup. And then I've got a cursor for loop that says, go through every row that you find and display the last name.
I will say I'm guilty. I have sons. Yes, I did that in the past.
And I must say that it's a very common thing that I see. And I think a lot of people won't consider it to be bad lazy. So I'll put out my ideas. You should feel free to in the comments say that is a good lazy, I love it. Or if you have other ideas, by the way, for good and bad lazy, put them in the comments and we might bring you on to even talk about them. Maybe. So I see this a lot. I see it in a lot of code throughout the years, both within Apex for Apex developers and non-Apex developers. So here's the thing. The bottom line is that this is a single row fetch. Now, the reason this is lazy and it gets the job done is that I don't have to declare a record. I don't have to declare a variable to put this into. I don't have to open, fetch, close, or a select into. I can just use the cursor for loop, which does a lot of stuff for me automatically to say, open the cursor. For each row fetched, do this, stop when you don't find anything, and then close the cursor when you're done, right? That's cursor for loops, and cursor for loops are wonderful. And in fact, they're one of the best examples of how PLC, the Oracle organization back in the late 1980s, took the Ada language and turned it into a database programming language by using the syntax of Ada and then finding all the ways that it could specialize it into deep integration with database. Cursor for loops are great. Here's why I think this is bad lazy. you're only fetching a single row. When I look at a code that has a loop in it, what I read is, okay, we're getting multiple rows, or we might get multiple rows. Therefore, we're going to use a loop. Therefore, we're going to run this code for each row fetched. And the problem with that is that when somebody looks deeper into the code, they say, wait a minute, that's just one row. Why did they do this? And in general, you don't want to write code that raises questions. If I read your code and I say to myself, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? That's not good code, right? That's code that is making it hard for me to maintain and understand.
Yes.
Ideally, you write code that speaks to you, that says, here's what I'm doing and here's why, and it's all right there for you. So,
You're right.
yeah. So I think that's
for me. Sometimes it's easier because all the statement, the fetch is hard to remember. So the for loop is easier. That's why I did it.
And it's less code too. There's no question. So for example, just back over here. Sorry, I'm showing you a post for a future tip. So here's my rewrite of that same piece of code to do the same thing. And this handle. So as you can see, first of all, oh my God, it's a lot more code, right? So that's the advantage being lazy. You sometimes get more productive. But this does it right. So I'm going to go back and get the original. I'll probably spend all the time on this and not even get to the good lazy. Oh my God. Right? So it's a lot shorter, but notice all the things that I'm now doing that I didn't do before. Now, first of all, it's explicit. This is a one row fetch. And if I don't find a row, that's okay. I'm not going to display anything. Okay. That certainly matches this behavior. But this procedure and the use of a cursive for loop also possibly masks an error. So if this was finding two rows, which should only find one, am I going to see an error? No. I will hide a serious data integrity problem. This exposes that because the select into will raise too many errors. So this is bad lazy. This is, I think, the right way to code a single row fetch. But I wouldn't call it good lazy because it's not lazy at all. You're actually taking the time to use percent types, trap both of the main errors, find and use the relogging. So there's an example of bad lazy, but this is not the example of good lazy. Now it's time to talk about good lazy. So if you would unshare my screen for a moment, put me back on. Thank you. So, okay, so that's one example, and I bet other people have even gone ahead and put some other ideas, or please feel free to send me other ideas so that we can explore those later on. But what I want to do is show you now an example of good lazy. So what does good lazy mean? Good lazy means, well, you could take a lot of time or effort or whatever, money, to do something. But instead, you're going to find a way to do that same thing that will even get the job done as well or better, but less time, less resources, maybe less money. It doesn't apply to programming, but maybe something else in your life. So what I want to do is talk about an element of PL SQL that corresponds to good lazy and falls into the general category of let Oracle do the heavy lifting. Okay. And so let's take a look at, and as I said that, I thought of an example that I could show you that's a very specific code example, but then I'll get distracted again. So what I want to talk to you about are compile time warnings. So go ahead and share my screen, Michelle. Let's switch over to, let's go back to SQL Developer for a second. And let's pull up my file. Yes, I could have been a little bit better prepared, but that's okay. All righty. So PL SQL warnings or compile time warnings was a feature built into the compiler back in Oracle 10G Release 1. So it's been around for a long time, along with many other major compiler features. I won't get into all those now. Compile time warnings are something that is not turned on automatically for you. And whenever you have something that's not automatically turned on, the chance of you using it goes way down. So I want to talk to you about why this is so important, why it's good lazy, and why you should pretty much always turn it on. So when I compile a piece of code, the main thing that the compiler does, oh my gosh, sorry about that. I should have turned off notifications too. So of course, the main job of a compiler is to take this code, compile it successfully so that you can run it. And if it can't compile it successfully, if there's a compile error, then you can't use the code. So obviously, you can't do anything until the compiler says, you're good to go, you can run your code. But you could have written some really bad piece of code that still runs. So the idea behind compile time warnings is that if your code compiles without error, Then you can ask the PL/SQL compiler to give you advice. How can I improve this code? Can I make it run faster? Is there a better way to write this? Are there features in PL/SQL that I wasn't even aware of that the compiler obviously knows about and it might recommend to use in a particular part of my code? That's what warnings are for. So let's run through an example. Let's go ahead and reconnect just in case I have to do that. So in my session, I can turn on warnings in my session for an individual program unit. In this case, I'll turn it on for my entire session. And I'm going to say, set my PL/SQL warnings to turn them all on, enable all. And then when I compile a piece of code in my session, it will give me feedback on that code. Let's go to ATP user. Let's run the statement. Okay, so it altered my session. That's great. Now I'm going to compile my program. I'm going to try to compile my program. And it says you've got a bunch of errors. Now, you can see it says error, but it's not actually an error. See the PLW, that means it's a warning. But it's the same show errors program. It's the same underlying data dictionary view, user_errors, that contain the warnings as well. But when you see a PLW, then you know it's a warning, and you also know it did compile. And it tells me information about my code. It says, hey, what about auth ID? You forgot about the auth ID clause. So right away, you're being reminded that you should be deciding between definer and current user, definer rights versus invoker rights, which you may not know about and you can explore. Here's a really great one of my all-time favorites. An operation will raise an exception. So the warning system is telling you, you've got a runtime error right there. I know it's going to happen. I'm not going to stop you from running your program because it is valid PL/SQL, but really, Stephen, you're going to divide by 0? Now, notice it doesn't tell me what the specific error is, but it tells me in general, you've got a problem. Okay. And then it says, hey, this is another really important one, powerful one, unreachable code. Now, imagine going back to good lazy, bad lazy. Of course, you would like to know, right, if you write a procedure, if half of that procedure never gets executed, like could not possibly get executed, well, that's something you really want to know about. For you to walk through the code, logically analyzing it yourself and identifying unreachable code is very difficult to do. The compiler, it might have been difficult, but they did it. So for example, since B is false, this is never true. This will never be executed. And I get that unreachable code. Now you can also get some very interesting feedback depending on how the different errors interact. So let's go explore a little bit more. Then I want to show you some resources behind PL/SQL warnings. So what I'm going to do now is change from enable all, which simply says, hey, here are all the warnings we found. And then I'm going to say, you know what? I want them to be all treated as errors. So you could say to yourself, I really want my programs to be clean. I'm not going to allow a program to be compiled unless it has 0 warnings as well. So I turn on error all, not enable all, error all. Now I'm going to try to compile my program again. And now I get different information. Notice I got a PLS, not a PLW. So it used to be a PLW, now it's a PLS, and it's the same issue. So now because I said that all of these warnings should be treated as errors, as soon as it hits the first error, it stops. So an interesting aspect here is it forces me to get really, really clean, but it also means that I'm only going to be tackling them an error at a time. So for example, now if I go back and add auth ID definer, and compile again, now it shows me operation will raise an exception and the unreachables. So you might run into some interesting odd behaviors as it tackles different kind of warnings when they're errors or not. But notice these are all compile errors. Now, I recommend that you don't do error all. It's too hardcore. And honestly, there are a number of warnings which are just telling you about your code, not even telling you that there's an issue. Like you marked a program for deprecation is actually a warning, but it's okay. So you wouldn't want that to error out. What you can do is write very, very specific kinds of warning commands. So I can say, for example, I would like to set as errors 2 different categories of warnings, severe and performance. So I want to know if you have any ideas, PL/SQL, on how to make my code go faster. I want to know about it, and I don't want my, well, I want to know about it, but it can still compile. Anything that you consider to be a severe problem, I want to know about it and fix it. And in particular, whether or not you think it's severe, I want all of these to be flagged as errors. So is it do I have unreachable code? Is it going to raise an exception at runtime? Does my function not return a value at all? I want to know about those. And these can then be put into your global login file. So in SQL Developer, for example, if I go to Preferences and search for login, search for database. There we go. So if you search for database, file name for connection startup script, I can put my script in here and it will automatically enable warnings according to the specification. Now, let's do it. Yes, I can also go to the PL/SQL compiler page and actually do at a very high level. I can say information should be enabled, severe should be error, performance should be error. So this will do the same thing as your alter session statement, but you can simply do it through the UI. Notice it doesn't give you the granularity like specifying individual error codes. So either way you do it, what I would do is start to turn on warnings right when you get started in your session, and it will always be turned on for your compilation process. Now you might be saying, Stephen, I don't know what 5005 is. How did you know that? Well, I know it because I live and breathe PL/SQL, but everybody can know these things. So as a part of the Oracle database documentation, there's database error messages, and I encourage you to check it out. It has all the different aura errors, and all the different kinds of errors that you might run into in Oracle database, including PLS and PLW. So PLS are all the compile time errors in PL/SQL, but more importantly for us right now, PLW, all the warnings. Now, you might not think it's the most exciting reading, but I'd encourage you to go to this page and just kind of look through it and see what they're talking about as issues in code. Obviously, you can wait until you run into it, but one of the things I pointed out is that you can use warnings to inform you about features of PL/SQL you might not know about, like Pragma inline. What's that? Maybe I should go explore Pragma, or one right at the top that's important. No copy. What's no copy about? That's actually a performance feature. So you can actually learn about PL/SQL from the warning subsystem, and you can identify warnings that you really, really don't like and turn them into errors, like function does not return value. This to me is such an embarrassing design error, right? I literally don't even execute a return statement. Wow. I definitely don't want an end user to ever see that error or even see it in a log. In addition, if you head over to Live SQL, yep, I'll create a new session. Sure, no problem. And you type in warning, you will see a whole lot of scripts that show you how to use compile time warnings in different ways. I won't go into any of these right now, something for you to explore, but there's a lot of good information here about PL/SQL warnings and how to leverage them. Okay, so why don't you not share my screen? Let's go back big time, big faces. So to sum up, I think that's an example of good lazy, because I could spend the time myself analyzing my code, learning everything about PL/SQL, basically doing all the upfront work to get to a clean compile. But wow, that would take a lot of time. And really, I'm going to do it better than the folks who built the PL/SQL compiler and know the language inside it. I don't think so. So by turning on compile time warnings, I save myself time and I end up with much better code, a clear winning approach, an example of good lazy. What do you think?
Well, I think it's very interesting. And as Ramona said, it's a good part of the code review because it helps you to understand what have you done. I have sometimes errors about the function not returning error. Oh my God.
Yeah, right?
Yes, but it's very interesting. And it's going to save you some time.
That's it, right? It improves your code so much. Now, I see a couple of comments here. Right? Good lazy using row type objects instead of defining a bunch of different variables, right? If you ever write a piece of code that has like 25 variables and the real big tip is they all have the same prefix, like I saw this recently in some code, TMP underscore, temp underscore, temp underscore, temp underscore. It should be a record. It should be temp dot, temp dot, temp dot. So that's a really good idea. And Eric Sacramento says another way to avoid having, let's see, right, is to use select last name from dual join user on 1=1. So this, I think, would be a way to avoid the no data found, I believe is what Eric is going after. And Eric, interesting idea. This might be another general tip for the future, which is don't be clever. So clever can be good, clever can be bad. I happen to not like clever so much. Now I'm biased. I am not clever. I think my brain works really fast. My mouth certainly works super fast. But clever, I'm not really good at that. And the problem with clever in programming is that it makes it hard to understand. Like I would look at that piece of code and say, join user on 1 = 1. First of all, I don't do ANSI joins. I'm an Oracle guy. So like, what is that syntax? And second of all, why are you doing that? So interesting idea. I would not take that approach.
And talking about the exceptions, so in my case, sometimes I handle my code in the exception. For example, let's say that I want to check if a record exists. And if it exists, I will do an update. And if it doesn't exist, I will do an insert. And it is okay to handle the when the no data found, just doing the insert there, because I don't want to do the evaluation. And so for me, it's faster doing a select into, update, no data found, insert. So is that a good lazy?
So
Please.
I was going to show a piece of code, but we're almost out of time, so we won't skip that.
Oh,
We'll
yeah.
touch on this briefly, but I think we're going to come back to it in a future tip series. When this series, future tip, I would say that's bad lazy. So the idea is that I know I might get an exception. If I get an exception, then I want to execute some other code. So basically what you're doing is using exception handling as a form of conditional processing, right? Conditional
Yes.
logic. And it's very appealing in some ways. And in a lot of ways, it might be okay. But I think there are some serious concerns that one should be aware of. So I'd say in general, never put application code in your exceptions section. Exception sections are for handling errors, logging information, and maybe propagating it back out. They're not for application code. So let's leave it at that. But I think we'll definitely cover that in a future tip.
Perfect.
I knew Michelle was going to be on our case. Come on. We got
This is your producer speaking. We have a couple of minutes and we have a quiz to run.
Let's do it.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's give people a few more minutes. No, not minutes. Couple more seconds to join our Kahoot.
Go to kahoot.it.
Yep.
Enter that in the code. And it's in the chat as well if you just want to copy paste it. We'll give you
in the chat. We've got 12 people in the Kahoot. We've got at least 45 people watching. There you go.
Join up. And here's another idea from Phil on terrible lazy. Using positional parameters instead of name parameters, especially when there are more than 3 parameters. I like that one too, yes. So bad lazy. I'm going to compile these and put them in a blog post. And you can also comment on my blog post when it's published. Bad lazy is...
Yeah, I was going to say, so you made all sorts of references to great resources. They're part of your blog post. It will be up later today, and you can access it from the YouTube channel, from where you're watching the video, from your Feuertips page on the INSIM website. All right, guys, I think we should get going, and hopefully, fingers crossed, this will be smoother than last week. We've got 16 people participating. I think we'll have
more time. All right, let's do it.
All right, here we go. Start.
It's loading.
Loading.
I don't think Kahoot uses an Oracle database. All right, here comes my quiz.
It is a multi-select. One or more possible answers. Here you go.
Mark any choice that you think is correct. With compile time warnings, I can, and I'll read them to you while you're doing this. Get tips to improve performance. Identify runtime errors at compile time. Trace program execution. Learn about PL SQL features. So mark any one of those that you think is correct. Don't mark the ones you think are incorrect. And then submit your answer.
It's good. I think we had 15 people playing. 10 people have answered. This is much better, Stephen. We've given people enough time.
But why are more people taking the quiz? My God, you could pick the charity. You could tell us how to spend INSOM's money. Come on, isn't that appealing? It's almost like when you pay taxes, you tell the government how to spend your money. Wait a minute. No, you don't. Oh. All right. Well, I think 90 seconds is probably enough.
Yeah. All right.
So
go. If I skip this now. Huh.
Now you're worried about stopping it early, right?
I kind of
That's
am.
okay.
So if you
Let it
don't
run. So
mind, let's just,
I'm going to
shoot
tell
the
you.
breeze for another 18 seconds because I feel like I should be able
There
to
are more
skip
clues.
here, but let's
There's
not.
more people answering. We'll definitely wait. I was going to tell them which one is right and wrong, but um, I'll wait 3 more seconds to say that. Excellent.
Wow.
All
Okay,
right.
cool. Now, as you can see here, so 3 of them were right, 1 was wrong. The only one that was wrong is trace PL/SQL execution. So you don't use that for compile time warnings. You could use the profilers, you can use your own logging information, your own instrumentation. But certainly get tips to improve performance a whole lot. For example, you'll be told when to put no copy onto your out and in-out parameters. We could do more, or it's no longer we, now that I'm within some. Oracle could do more. Like you could get a warning saying you've got a loop with an insert inside it. That should be for all. I'm hoping they add that soon. Identify runtime errors at compile time. Absolutely. I showed you that one. It won't tell you which error you're going to get, but it'll tell you you're definitely going to die on this one. And learn about features. Yeah, you can learn about all sorts of things in PL/SQL you probably never knew existed. And it looks like our team was listening very well on the talk today because very few people didn't get it right. Cool. All right.
Yeah, we'll definitely have a winner this week. And Plamen, by the way, agreed with me that I shouldn't press skip. So that was quite nice.
Good idea.
And Colin says exceptions should be exceptional. There we go. Okay, great show. Marlyn, thank you so much for being Steven's co-host this week. I hope you'll come back and do it again.
Sure, I will.
Made my life a lot easier.
Hope that makes sense to everybody. And really, so whether it's on Twitter, you can DM me, or you can look at the tweets we've already put out. If you have other ideas for good lazy or bad lazy, let me know, and I'll compile them, add them to the blog post, etc. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great week. If you're celebrating St. Patrick's Day, have a beer or two, but don't have too many beers. And we'll see you in a week. Take care, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.